This is Football at 4.
Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and is brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Well, this is not an ordinary day. It's not an ordinary thing to call it. Legal tampering. You are legally allowed to tamper, which is essentially breaking the rules. You cannot sign free agents until Wednesday, but you are allowed to sign free agents before Wednesday. Doesn't make a lot of sense, I know. InsideTheBirds.com, the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can get on all podcasting platforms. And Geoff Mosher's in the house today on a day where the Eagles probably made a move that we heard a lot about, Jeff, but probably shocked a lot of people that they went out and signed Saquon Barkley to a 3-year deal, a lot of money, $37.5 million, $26 million guaranteed. We kept hearing it. But now it's official. What do we think about the messaging on signing a running back and giving them big money?
Mike, you set this up really well, and I don't even know if you intended to do that, but you brought up the oxymoronical nature of the title, legal tampering. How can it be tampering if it's legal, right? That's an oxymoron. Well, I don't know if there's a bigger oxymoron than the Philadelphia Eagles spending $26 million guaranteed on a running back who has had a history of injuries. So you asked me what the messaging is, and I can tell you I feel a little bit conflicted myself because in these interviews with you and in our podcast with myself and Adam Kaplan, we have been saying constantly that this is not a team in transition, that we expect Howie Roseman to have a very aggressive free agency. We've used the words very aggressive often. That is what we heard. And yet I sit here right now trying to figure out why the Eagles have just given that much guaranteed money to a running back when that has never been a part of their process before. And what do you and I talk about all the time? You might question the Eagles' process, their positional value, how they go about doing things differently, but it's been a formula that has worked for them. And I don't know why this offseason Howie Roseman suddenly decided, even after saying at the Combine and even in his end-of-season press conference that their process is still their process, that they went out and felt the need to do this, but they've done it. And so what is the messaging? To me, the messaging is still that they're going to be very aggressive, and they're probably not done in free agency. They've brought in a pass rusher. They brought in a running back. We're going to see what they do at safety. They extended Landon Dickerson. But I'm very curious to see how this works out because my general philosophy is, Mike, when you watch a team do something that's out of character, there's a reason you can be skeptical about it and wonder what's the messaging behind that.
Yeah, there's a lot that you just said that makes me really think about different things. One of them is, are they telling us that they think Saquon Barkley is a significant upgrade over DeAndre Swift? And if so, do you agree with their assessment?
I think when both are healthy and at their best, Saquon Barkley is a better running back. I mean, the guy had a 2,000-yard season as a rookie. He caught 95 balls. I mean, he does everything that Swift does, but just probably more dynamically and more explosively. But when you talk about it economically, Mike, and no team studies the economics of positions and positional value as much or more than the Eagles, I should say. There are probably teams that do it as much, but not more. Last year, you got 1,264 yards, total yards, combined yards out of DeAndre Swift at a price tag of less than $2 million. Last year, the Giants got 1,240 total yards out of Saquon Barkley for $11 million. Where is the economic proof that you should now pay $26 million when, by the way, not only last year, but for the last 3 to 5 years, the Eagles have gotten these great bargain deals at that position, and it's worked for them. They've had a number 1 rushing offense, they've had a number 5 rushing offense, and a number 6 rushing offense over the last 3 years, and they've had 3 different ball carriers lead them in rushing. So, again, the player is a great player, and the money we don't have to really obsess about because they obviously had enough money to sign Bryce Huff. They're obviously going to make more moves. not one of those things where you're like, oh, robbing Peter to pay Paul. It seems like there's plenty of money for them to do what they want to do, but it's the consistency with how they operate. Why a sudden change in philosophy on the heels of just all these major abrupt changes in the coaching staff and on the heels of a 1-6 collapse? It's just confounding to me, Mike, covering the team for this long.
Well, and the thing is, right before you came on last hour, I'm looking at what Swift did last year. I said for 1,049 yards, did not catch the ball nearly enough. Saquon Barkley has to be significantly better than 1,049 yards and a much bigger part of the offense in the pass game than Swift was last year at that price.
That would be the idea. Either that or it was just, we want Saquon Barkley. We got a lot of money. Don't care what the price is. We just figure, and I think you can make this argument justifiably. I liked what DeAndre Swift brought. I thought he was a problem in pass protection, which made the whole idea of him being a pass catcher problematic because you could only really throw the ball to him on first and second down, right? When it was third down or when it was 2 minutes or when it was 4 minutes, it was harder to throw the ball to him because you also need those guys to sometimes stay in and block. Maybe they think Saquon's better at that. But at the end of the day, you could probably make the argument that you win games with playmakers like Saquon Barkley. Obviously, the Giants didn't win a lot of games because they had a bad team around it. But you might say you could win more games with a dynamic player like that over a really good player like DeAndre Swift. But yeah. I don't know if there's conclusive proof of that, to be honest.
By the way, Devin Singletary has signed with the Giants, so he will replace Saquon Barkley with the Giants. I did say this about Saquon, the year they went to the playoffs when they were a pretty good team, Barkley was the offense, 1,300 yards. He was a really good back, and you're going to say, look, this is going to be the best offensive line that he's ever played behind. I mean, better than any offensive line the Giants have ever had. But when they had a solid team 2 years ago, he was 1,300 yards in a big part of their offense. In fact, he was their offense for the most part. But this is going to be a huge upgrade in offensive line for Saquon.
Yeah, it will be the best offensive line he's played behind. But you do wonder if that was a big – well, I mean, I don't wonder about what his thinking is. I mean, you get $26 million guaranteed. You're just going whoever gives it to you. But
well, Houston was apparently in on it as well, so we'll throw that out there.
Yeah, Houston, I think the Bears were too. But this is not, I think, it's a little bit more. And this is not the Eagles' offensive line of Jason Kelce as your center and Isaac Seumalo as your right guard.
True.
Landon Dickerson as your left guard. This is, yes, you have Landon Dickerson. Yes, you have Lane Johnson and Mailata. But you now have 2/5 of your starting offensive line that's going to be not Jason Kelce and Seumalo, right? It's going to be Cam Jurgens at center, and who knows at right guard. Maybe Tyler Steen, maybe somebody they draft. That is a big, big difference. And I'm not sitting here telling you the line's going to stink or they're not what they used to be. You got to give these guys we got to see, but I also can't sit here and say that they're definitely going to play at that level either. So it's not necessarily the offensive line that Barkley may have seen as an opponent for the last few years.
By the way, Giants teammate Xavier McKinney has signed with Green Bay. So Green Bay gets Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney. The Packers are obviously going all in to try to make that next step from playoff team and surprising win in the playoffs to Super Bowl team now. So Xavier McKinney, Giants safety, he goes to Green Bay. 4-year, $68 million deal there. The Eagles were said to have been in on McKinney as well. That means they need to go to the next level of safety. Saquon Barkley in Philadelphia, a lot on that. DeAndre Swift, he went to the Bears. So obviously the Eagles have changed their look at running back. It also sounds, Geoff, that they're about to change their look on the edges of their defense with Bryce Huff signing a 3-year, $51 million deal. What is the messaging there for both Sweat and Reddick?
Well, the Eagles have said they want to get younger at that position specifically. They like to. They want to play Nolan Smith. They want to play Jalen Carter. They got to get Jordan Davis ready. Bryce Huff, young player, emerging pass rusher, hasn't played a whole lot of snaps. So to me, it doesn't signal that you that Reddick and Sweat are definitely both gone. You feel like one of those two, most likely, if not both. But I would still expect the Eagles to look at the edge, because right now your top three edges, let's say Reddick and Sweat aren't coming back. Your top three are Bryce Huff, who's never played more than, I think, 42% of the snaps for the Jets. Nolan Smith, who's going to be into year two and did not play very much as a rookie. Brandon Graham, who re-signed but is probably not going to be playing 45 to 55% of the snaps at his age. So you would think that they would have to continue to add either via the draft or the veteran defensive end market if they are going to say goodbye to both Reddick and Josh Sweat.
So do you think both are gone or just one? Do you think they say, look, we're ready to just move on, give Nolan Smith one edge, Bryce Huff the other edge, go with Jalen Carter, Jordan, just basically go with a completely youthful line here? Or do you think it's only one of the two? I know a lot of reports this weekend suggested that both could be gone.
Yeah, it's possible. I don't know if you remember this very wonky conversation that we had at the end of the year, Mike, about two gapping and one gapping and some of the issues that we were being told that the Eagles are having up front, where the players who were two gapping, which is basically, run defense where you're trying to occupy two guys at one time. Players who are asked to do that were sort of only holding their block for a little bit and then trying to go get the quarterback. They're trying to chase the sacks, and that hurt the Eagles in run defense. We saw that over the last 6-7 weeks. The Eagles were a bad run defense, almost like overnight, and players were not doing what they were supposed to do. So you can understand if part of this makeover is just Vic Fangio in, let's get young, moldable guys who are going to listen to Fangio and do what he's going to do and sort of move on from the old guard. So I can't sit here and tell you whether all are going to be back. Both two are going to be back. I think some of that will be market demand and what the Eagles receive in return. Would not shock me at all, though, if both Reddick and Sweat were gone.
Wow, what a crazy shift all of a sudden. The Reddick thing, probably doesn't want to make a lot, or they didn't want to pay him, so they can see that, but Josh Sweat potentially as well. What do you know about Bryce Huff and, what he could possibly – I look at Huff and I say, look, this is a guy who is a great story, undrafted, a lot of sacks, pressures. The numbers look great. The intangibles, not great against the run. But my question is, all right, you bring in this guy – I can't imagine he's going to be an upgrade over Reddick at his best.
Yeah, that would be really hard. Although, you know what? The Eagles have done a pretty good job identifying young pass rushers who are coming into their own. And, Reddick's a good example of that. Yeah, he had a couple of double-digit sack seasons under his belt, but he really came into his own with the Eagles. Two teams gave up on him even after double-digit sacks. And Javon Hargrave, I sort of see him as the interior version, right, of Bryce Huff. He was a guy with the Steelers that was a part-time, well, I don't want to say part-time player. He was a bench player. He was a situational player, a reserve player. The Eagles saw some great burst in him and he wound up having his best years with the Eagles. So you look at Huff sort of similarly. Yes, he was a part-time player. I'm sure the Eagles, for the money, are going to expect him to play more snaps, and they probably feel that as an ascending player, they can get the most out of him in their defense and get him from 10 sacks and however many quarterback hits and pressures to even more. But he won't have to do it by himself because they've also got Nolan Smith, who they believe will be on the come up, and they'll have Brandon Graham, and they'll probably draft a guy. And again, they might add another one.
Talk with Geoff Mosher, Football at 4 from the Inside the Birds podcast, and I'm sure you guys will be breaking down a lot of these moves. You got Bryce Huff here now on defense. You got Saquon Barkley as well. Almost as shocking, maybe, is the number, the signing of Landon Dickerson and the number he got. He is the highest paid guard of all time now. It is shocking there, but they obviously did not want to let him go, and him being a second-round pick, they had to jump out and do something here because he did not have that option year here. But good to see Dickerson back because you figure, as you kind of said, this offensive line might be in a little bit of flux. But now you don't have to worry about Landon Dickerson, in the future here. So how much bringing him back at that number, though? Woo, man. Big guy, $85 million means to this offensive line.
Yeah, it's a big number until, you see what the guards are now getting in free agency, which is, I'm sure, what the Eagles were expecting when they came back from the combine and they were hearing some of the numbers being thrown around. So it doesn't surprise me at all. And this guy is a two-time Pro Bowler. As you said, it's better when you have a guy on a 4-year deal, a second-round pick, and you're through 3 years, he's made the Pro Bowl twice. It is absolutely better to do that deal after year 3, before everybody starts re-upping and the free agency period begins and all that, because the closer he gets to free agency, the more his price tag is just going to go up. So it is a lot of money. The guy did have a huge injury history at Oklahoma. He wound up, Alabama. But he's come here. He's stayed healthy. Now he leaves a lot of games, right? You see him limping off, but he comes back in. He stayed healthy. You got to hope he continues to stay healthy. But it's an offensive lineman. It's a worthwhile investment. And again, it would have just cost them more in the long run if they waited until this time next year and do it.
All right. Over the weekend, Fletcher Cox, obviously a legendary player in this organization, probably got lost in the sauce a little bit because of Jason Kelce and the immense popularity there. But I guess the impact Fletcher had and the impact of his loss to this team. Do they need to sign someone to replace him, or are they okay in-house with what they have?
Well, the Eagles, amazingly, they kept 7 defensive tackles on the roster last year. That was a little bit of an outlier. They do like to have at least 5 interior defensive linemen. Now, the impact is that you could say Fletcher Cox was their best defensive lineman last year, most consistent from front to back. I think Jalen Carter made more splash plays, but Fletcher Cox, we saw Jalen fade a little bit down the stretch, as I want to say as expected. Again, it was another guy from Georgia who didn't play a large percentage of the snaps of Georgia because they rotate so much. So I'm sure he got a little, fatigue as the season went on, and they'll have to be better next year playing more. But Fletcher Cox, for his age, was their most consistent interior defensive line, most consistent lineman altogether. So you lose that rock of consistency that you've had for, 12 years now. And it's tough to just, like we're saying with Cam Jerk and Jason Kelce, yeah, you couldn't put a first rounder in there in Jalen Carter, but until the guy plays like that year after year after year and shows you he can, you don't know that you're going to get it.
Yeah.
So the Eagles have to make sure that they're doing a great job coaching up these defensive linemen. They have I think you got a good top 3, Mike, right? You got Jordan Davis, you got Jalen Carter, you got Milton Williams, okay? They drafted Moro Ojomo. He'll get there into year 2. So that's 4. I think you're going to want to see them go out and get a veteran just to, like they did with Katavius Street last year, maybe on a 1-year deal to give him 5. Maybe they draft a guy on day 3 to give him 6. This is a position that they're always looking to add to. But whoever they add is going to be most likely behind that top 3 of Carter, Davis, Milton, Williams.
Yeah, we'll certainly, once the dust settles on this, get to see more because, what do we know about Vic Fangio and how much he wants to use Jordan Davis? What do we know about how much he wants to use Jalen Carter? Does he want to use Carter more? Does he want to use Davis more? Does he like Milton Williams that he wants to get him? Who gets the Fletcher Cox snaps is really going to be the big thing here. Does that mean Davis gets more snaps? Does that mean Carter gets more snaps? Does Williams get more snaps? Or is there somebody else here that gets more of those? Because Fletcher Cox, as you said, he got a lot of snaps last year that now need to be replaced. So that's what's going on with the Eagles right now. Saquon Barkley is in. McKinney has signed with the Packers. Do you think they still look to sign a veteran safety in free agency between now and, Wednesday when you're allowed to?
Yes. I think they have to, Mike. And we know that they were talking to a lot of different safeties, McKinney being one of them they were interested in. Went to the Packers. We'll have to see, keep an eye on a guy like Julian Blackman who played for the Colts. So there's a Nick Sirianni connection there. Kid from the Rams, Jordan Fuller is from New Jersey. I don't know if the Rams are going to bring him back. He's a free agent. So there's someone. And of course, the Broncos safety who played for Vic Fangio, Justin Simmons, probably an option there. It's a buyer's market at safety. Obviously, the cream of the crop is not there any longer with Winfield going back to the Bucs and to the Packers. But you can still remember when the Eagles signed Rodney McLeod, and people were like, "Okay, Rodney McLeod is never in a Pro Bowl, just a guy who started for the Rams for a couple of years." Well, he wound up being a really important part of their buildup, and the Eagles will have to identify some safeties here that will not maybe blow anybody away, but can still give you some pretty good production and, maybe have some familiarity with Vic Fangio. We'll see. But yeah, I'm not panicked about it just because they didn't get Xavier McKinney, but they have to get somebody at that position, no doubt.
McKinney goes to Green Bay. Josh Jacobs goes to Green Bay. So those have been two big moves for the Packers. Release Aaron Jones today. Tony Pollard signs with Tennessee. Kirk Cousins goes to Atlanta. So those are some of the biggest moves. Anything tickle your fancy on the first day of legal tampering so far?
Well, one thing to watch, two things that strike me. One is Danielle Hunter, the defensive end from the Vikings, who had 18 and a half sacks last year and has been one of the best pass rushers in the league. I know he's 30, but I think as we're speaking, he's still out there. And when you see guys that good still out there, if this goes into tomorrow, you're like, a team like the Eagles that loves to get a bargain when it sees one, right? And I would just say that's interesting to me. Whenever a guy doesn't sign right away, who's got those kind of credentials, you wonder if the number comes down at all and if teams who like those kind of players pounce.
Yeah.
And then I would say the same thing about the Packers that it with the Eagles. This is a franchise that has never, to my recollection, been a huge free agent spending team. And now they go and get Josh Jacobs, and now they go and get Xavier McKinney. So I wonder about their change of philosophy and approach and whether that's something that everybody's going to think is great or if it's something to be skeptical about.
Also, do the Eagles change their philosophy and thinking on the defensive side of the ball, right? I mean, they did something on offense that we didn't foresee coming in terms of monetarily. Do they target something on defense and say, this is not a way we've gone? We're organizational philosophy. Are we watching them change their organizational philosophy right before our very eyes?
Well, the fact that Patrick Queen is already off the board makes me think, probably not at linebacker. When Barkley signed, I'm like, man, if Patrick Queen signs too, then we'll know the Eagles are not the Eagles that we thought they were.
Right. So
far it looks like, they are the Eagles still at linebacker.
Right. That would be like a 1995 high school football game. Go get the running back and the linebacker.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we're keeping our eye on it, and I know Jeff, Adam, and Andrew will have you up to date with the Inside the Birds podcast. You can check that out, and right here on Football at 4. Adam's here tomorrow. Jeff's back on Wednesday when all these moves will actually be legal. They will have actually happened on Wednesday. We'll discuss all that and more. Football at 4 from the Inside the Birds podcast, guys. Thanks, bud.
You got it, man. Talk to you soon.
All right, Geoff Mosher, and, of course, the Inside the Birds podcast, bringing you Football at 4.